if you've got a sound business and a sound business model, you can control what you control, and you can not control what you don't control. That sounds really silly, but to put context around that, I can't control the market cycles, hard market, soft market. I can't control the economy. Is it a good economy? Is it a bad economy? I can't control it. What I can control is take really good care of my people, take really good care of my clients, and really be great partners with my insurance companies. So they're also there locking arms with me during good times and bad times.
All right, Rusty, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Every time I'm with you, energy's high. You bring that to the table. And I just want to start there, because when I talk to people that work for you, most people will say he's infectious energy. Where does that come from?
It's funny you say that, and I'll digress just a moment. So I not been sick for 25 years, literally, except for COVID. I did get COVID in December of 2020. And I back to back, I had flu A, and I always take a flu shot. And then I came charging back because I felt great. And then I ended up with a sinus infection. So for a period of 2 weeks, I was kind of down in the dumps, but everybody that works with me are like, okay, when Reid's down in the dumps, he's still higher energy than I am on a regular day. And I honestly have no idea. I've actually always been like this. My wife, Molly, would tell you, I pop out of bed like this. So I don't know if it's just my love for living, if it's just how I'm wired. I mean, somebody asked me one day, are you on any kind of medicine that maybe amps you up? And I'm like, well, if a Centrum vitamin in the morning does that, I literally only drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning. I'm afraid if I drank more, it might be a disaster for all, right? Yeah. But and I guess, I've been blessed. I mean, I love what I do. I don't really view my job as a job. A lot of people do. So I look forward to what that holds. And every day is a new day. Not every day is an easy day, by the way. So maybe an element is me getting fired up, ready to go, knowing I'm going to step into the battlefield. I've been wildly blessed, wonderful family. So, who knows? But yeah, this is, sadly, this is me. And for somebody that doesn't like to get rolling early in the morning, I'm not an early morning guy like some of my partners, but I mean, when I wake up, I'm like this, and I can go the distance and still be like this when I shut my eyes, whatever hour that may be.
That's awesome. Well, it's a superpower. I mean, I've known you for a while, and I would say it's as consistent as anybody. You are always high energy. I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll talk about how that plays into business. Let's start with how it all started. So you have built, everybody I talk to, if you've made it this far in the podcast, it's a partner of yours, has said it's one of the greatest investments, or being a part of it, that I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
We know a lot of the same people, and unequivocally is like, you had to have gotten into Higginbotham. It's a miracle. So let's go back to how it all started. How did you even get in the insurance business?
So he's candidly a partner. So I've broken a lot of the probably normal rules of business. I've hired many of my friends. So way back when on the insurance game, I'll actually start in college, because this kind of tells a funny story. So originally, when I went to college, literally right after I graduated from high school, I was headed to the University of Texas. Really excited. Growing up a Longhorn, my mom and dad both went there. My aunts and uncles went there, et cetera. So I'm locked and loaded, ready to go. Already kind of had down to my 2 fraternities that I was going to pick, and it was really going to depend upon, well, one of my friends was joining them and the other one was joining there, and I was literally struggling with it. And then boom, my dad dies, and big change of plans. He was only a kid of his mother and father, and 43, so real young. And my grandparents basically said, hey, you need to stay close to home. And I grew up in Dallas. And so I said, well, great. I'll go to SMU. And they're like, well, that's not in the budget. And I was like, I'm like, what do you mean? I've actually paid for most of my college anyway. And so I'm like, it can be it sure can be in my budget. And I later kind of figured out that they were a lot wiser than probably I was in that regard. So I had really two choices: North Texas, which is where I ended up going, or back then North Texas State University, and UTA. And I had three of my buddies, Don Robinson, Dan Sullivan, and Rob Hardy, who all went to Hillcrest with me, going to North Texas. So I just followed them, and immediately thought I wanted to go into pre-med. Don't ask me why. I think because I loved always science and math, and I've always had, I just love kids, give me I'd be that dad. Everybody's like, oh my God. I'm like, bring them over. I have a ball. More the merrier. And so I really thought I kind of was wired to be a pediatrician, and got to organic chemistry. And it's not that I failed, which everybody always asks, but I just got to a place where I was like, oh my Lord, if this is a precursor of what's coming, I'm out. And fortunately, Dr. Drenner, matter of fact, his daughter is a retired banker here in town. Met with him, and literally, I remember it's like it's just, I can shut my eyes and see us. We're standing on the steps of the biology building, which is where pre-med was at North Texas. Then there's a courtyard, and the business school is across from it. And I remember him going, well, tell me about your family. And I said, well, my dad was in insurance. He's deceased. My grandfather was in insurance. My one grandmother was in retail. My other grandmother's a homemaker. My mom's a psychologist. And I mean, he like in a nanosecond goes, go across the street, see Dr. Thornton, and he'll fix you up. And hence I did, and kind of told him the same story. And he goes, well, here's the great news. The business school, you can kind of major in general business and then pick a minor. And he said, you hit insurance twice, so why don't you make insurance your minor? I was like, perfect. So that's what I did. So I'm working many jobs. And one of my fraternity brothers, a guy named Ed Coker, worked for an agency up there, Ramey King and Menace. And in 83, he graduates and goes to work for American General. I kind of followed his footsteps. And he said, hey, I know you're working a lot of jobs. How about getting a real job? And I was like, well, I thought my jobs were real, but I hear you. He said, well, it's a 1 to 5 deal. You work under the principles. And so I did. And so I literally worked for them till I graduated. Upon graduation, Terrell King, God rest his soul, he's now deceased, but he had literally 3 job offers lined up for me: American General, Trinity, and Hartford. And basically said to me, hey, if I was you, go work under J.D. White at American General. You'll learn a ton from him. He's a great guy, and he's hard. And I'm not scared of hard work. So I was like, that's perfect. So I had the other 2 interviews, didn't even care. I moved on. So August of 84, I go down to Houston and start in their training program, with really an eye towards hoping to get into their marketing arm. And so I did. And so started there. J.D. White approached me at an insurance conference in Austin and said, hey, I know you're from Dallas. Nothing's available there yet. But we've got a territory in Fort Worth, and it's kind of a claims office. And would you be interested in that? I said, absolutely. I'd love to do that. So I, came up, checked it out, said, I'd love that job. And my job at that time was I had some personnel, responsibilities, but really my job was to get agents and brokers to sell our product, and then find new agents and brokers to sell our product. And thank the Lord, I met a guy named Bill Stroud, who was Paul Higginbotham's nephew. And Bill had bought the firm in the 60s, and it was kind of interesting. He kind of became the dad I didn't have. And I think he's got some wonderful son-in-laws, but I was clearly at that time the son he didn't have. And so we hit it off wonderfully on an interpersonal level. And, he hired me December 1st of 86. And, I always like to say the rest has been history from there. I mean, literally, he wanted to find an exit from the business, and why he put faith in this 27-year-old to lead that effort. He did, but thank God he did. And so, that kind of where it all began. So sadly, I've only had 2 professional jobs, American General and Higginbotham. And I always tell people, particularly, we're so inquisitive, and I'm always like, what do you think about Hig? I said, I'm not the guy to ask because I've been there forever. I don't know any difference, right? I don't know. The only other job I'm going to talk about, dated from August of 84 to December of 86. Most people can't even remember back then, right? So, but anyhow, that was kind of the beginning of my kind of quote unquote professional career.
Okay. I've read a lot on you, and I've watched the couple podcasts you've done, but I've never seen you talk about the year 1986 to 1987, because you started in 86 and you bought the business a year later. Walk me through like the however many months it was from starting to getting to that point. What happened?
So I'm going to make a slight adjustment on your comments.
Okay.
So I start December 1st of 86.
Yep.
And then really when I came in, Bill had 2 underwriting programs. And what that meant is he was actually acting as like the insurance company for both a company called Crum & Forster in Providence, Washington. And literally overnight, I'm running both of those programs. I mean, I really wasn't qualified, but I was running it. And then his Aunt Edith Higginbotham, who was married to Paul, it passes away, and literally he's the sole heir to her estate. So for him financially, life changed a bit. And then also I could tell he'd worked really hard. I mean, here's a guy that was born and raised in East Texas, worked for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, and, got thrown in, thought he was going to partner with his uncle. A year later, he's buying out from his aunt, the business, and didn't really know the insurance industry at all. Right. So I remember it was like yesterday, our birthdays were a day apart and we were 30 years apart. And so Bill got to a point where he was really ready to modify the ownership of Hig. And I mean, he was kind of not, tapping me on my shoulder going, Rusty, it's you if you want it. And so we went down a lot of the traditional paths, he was on the board of Bank Commerce, going there to borrow money, buy him out, et cetera. And we kind of stumbled across a guy named Ron Lent with Weaver and Tidwell, and he was an ESOP consultant. And he the light bulb went off for me, and more importantly, went off for Bill, because at the end of the day, it was his call what he wanted to do. And so we partially funded an ESOP in 87, and then we went full bore June of 89. So June of 89 is when we literally bought the company, and it was the perfect storm. At that point, he was clearly ready to move on. He was 57, and I guess he had anointed me to say, it's yours. And the only thing that was a little different from my end was when I was at American General, I literally would see this all the time. If you didn't have equity, the competing agents or the agents in that particular business, they would start up shop in many cases across the street and become a competing firm. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, I like growing. I mean, when I first came into Hig, I realized real quickly selling and all that would be probably part of my forte, and I was ready to go. So growth was important. I saw that there was other lines of coverage we could add to our portfolio mix. So that was important. But I kept being haunted by, if we don't figure out a way to solve for this equity deal. And again, I didn't even know what that probably really meant at the time, but I just remember if guys didn't have ownership, they'd pack up and become competition. So the ESOP, which is what we landed on, employee stock ownership plan, was just the perfect storm. It was great because not only would it create a vehicle where we could, you lever up basically. It's almost like a LBO. You're going to lever up. And then as you pay down the debt, shares get released kind of pro rata based on your ownership or your salary versus all salaries. Yeah. So it kind of, and I wasn't an MBA or anything. I didn't even know how to do any of this, right? And so it became a perfect way to transfer ownership. It also, if you think about it, if I was the 12th employee and Bill was the first, there was 11 people that were there before I showed up. And I'm a generous person. And I thought, well, they need to have ownership too. And by the way, if we do buy them and they don't get equity, are they going to pack up and create a competing firm? Right. So this ESOP was just the absolute perfect storm. And then for Bill had corporately speaking, it solved for ownership transfer. You could borrow money at 80% of prime because banks only had to declare 50% of the interest as revenue. So you could borrow money below prime. Now, what's comical back then, prime was 10%. So you're talking 8% now, but here's 8%. And they're freaking out because we had all those years of free money, right?
Yeah.
And then, the corporation, we got to deduct as a contribution, principal and interest. So you got to basically pay for it with pre-tax dollars. And then for Bill, it was effectively a tax-free exchange, and he could live off, and he'd have ordinary income coming off whatever he invested in. So for all parties involved, it kind of was, I wish I was smart enough to say, well, back then I just knew we needed to be an employee-owned company because that would launch us into the future. Not at all. That literally was the option that made great sense to me, made great sense for Bill. And I'd say, and Bill used to always have this wonderful saying. He'd always go, man, God takes care of children and idiots. Aren't you glad we're still kids? And I'm like, amen, brother. So I do think it just turned out to be that perfect storm for all of us, and still very much a part of who we are today.
I know the ESOP. I mean, you've already landed on it. A couple questions real quick. What you did then, is that even available today, or was that like you could do it back in the day, you can't do it today?
I think ESOP, now we walked down our journey in 2007. We actually, a group of us said, okay, it's time to buy out the ESOP and let those that need to kind of can diversify. And then we still have the complete availability to buy stock. We still give away effectively a promote. And that promote goes from me as the chairman CEO down to the reception at no cost to anybody. So just working there, you can earn the equivalent of stock, if you will, in the business. It's just a little bit of a different structure. But I know ESOPs are still very prevalent today. I don't know if they have the features that they had back then. Again, it might have been the perfect storm. I think I recall reading that the interest exclusion for banks is now gone. I mean, there's been some of the nuances that were wonderful for us are gone. And I love my CFO always says it best. He says, what Rusty really kept was what was great about being an ESOP. He just removed ERISA from the equation. Yeah. And there were a lot of regulatory dynamics that, by the way, is just part of what you had to do. So it never was really painful, but we'd really have tried to preserve ownership, again, synthetic equity that you earn via sweat equity, and then being literally employee owned and controlled. All that we have kept in place as we still sit here today.
So so it was 86, we'll call it, to 89. Mm-hmm. Did you know when you were joining in 86 that this was going to happen, or was it just serendipitous?
Well, I wish Bill was still alive. Yeah. Because we could get it. If we were both in here, we might be in here for 10 hours telling stories. So I was one of these guys that, again, I'm very loyal, always have been. And when I was with American General, they had what was called the northbound train. And effectively, when you're doing your review, there was a box that said, are they on the northbound train? And what that meant, that's back to this thing called modelnetics, and I won't get into all that. But on the northbound train, it basically meant you are eligible for growth and development within the organization. So I've got this guy over here, Bill Stroud, recruiting me to join for more than a year. So I'd known him for a long time. And his wife, Lou, who's still alive and I love to death, had her recruiting him. And at that point, they have Molly Reid, hook, line, and sinker recruiting, right? So as time developed, I would tell you that I didn't know that I was going to necessarily be in that position, but there was no doubt that Bill was recruiting me to be his successor, period. Yeah. And I think in life it's kind of interesting, and I think this is actually a healthy characteristic even of myself. I probably see myself different maybe than others might see me. And I think that's actually healthy and good. There's a word out there called arrogance, where people think they're really something and sometimes they're maybe not. I'm just not that guy. I'm the opposite of that. And so I think it was probably Bill saw something that I didn't even know existed in me. Now, I still think he's nuts for letting me do what I did when I did it, but I'm glad he did. Let's put it that way.
And then last question before we get to 89. Do you remember how they figured out how much of the company to sell to the ESOP? Was it a formula? Was it a...
So I think really again, he's not here to defend himself, but I think for Bill, the idea was I'm just going to sell 100% because that maximized his liquidity.
Got it.
Right. And I think that, and I'm really glad we went that direction. And I remember like it's yesterday, we borrowed $1,668,332. He and I were the only two on the note. I had no assets, so it was comical that I co-signed, but our banker back then said, I'll own you for the rest of your life if you default. That was enough for me to go, I'm focused not to. And then Bill had to post collateral, but as the debt was paid down, the collateral was released. So originally it was a 15-year amortization, and I can't remember, we paid it off in like 6 or 7 years. And really the ESOP from just a vehicle perspective, if you don't really grow the business, I don't know if that's the right tool you should use. Right. But in our case, man, we had the wind to our sails. We were growing leaps and bounds, and it allowed us to also basically get him off the debt, which I thought, again, just, some people go, hey, leave him on as collateral holders forever. Yeah. I wanted to, at that point, be just our regime, us control not only the business, but also control our destiny. Yep. And I will tell you, Bill was a fabulous mentor from that perspective. I mean, he would certainly bark if I screwed up, but he never got in my way, which was awesome. That's awesome. And by the way, I'm kind of that way today. a lot of people laugh at us because, we don't have a lot of bureaucratic board meetings and meetings for the sake of meetings. I mean, we know what our mission is, and it's to take great care of existing clients and add new clients, or more broadly, just live our values, right? Be family to our employees, advocate for our clients, partners with our carriers, and give back to the communities. And if you just stay focused on that, you don't need a whole lot of people getting in your way. Yeah. And we've been blessed to, our CAGR since 89. So when we launched this journey is 20.5%. That's for, whatever 30, I'm not good at math, but however many years that is, been a long time, 35 years this June that we've grown at that clip. And so not many companies have done that. And by the way, I have this saying, when growth stops, decay begins. I have another saying that growth cures a lot of sins. And so we've been blessed with growth, right? So it's helped us.
I told you at the beginning, everybody I've talked to that's worked with you said it's a miracle. 20% for 35 years. Yeah. And we're going to spend a good portion on actually how you've grown.
Got it.
Okay, 1989 rolls around. You start with 12 people. What did the organization look like by 1989? You'd been there 3 years. Was it still 12?
I'd actually jumped into the employee benefit arena at that point. And again, I wish I could say I had this great brain child and I thought, okay, we need to add benefits. But we had a gentleman named John Park that worked for Time Insurance Company. And he just bugged me all the time. Bug is the wrong word. He was very persistent. Yeah. And he's like, Rusty, do you realize your business insurance clients? And at that time, we were about 65 business insurance to 35% personal insurance. Okay. And he's like, that 65%, just let me go with you. We can sell benefits to them. And our company's really good at that. And I'm really good at that. Right. And so I finally agreed to that. And it was like I had this epiphany because we went out, we called on 3 customers that I knew wouldn't fire us if we messed up. Yeah. And we wrote all 3 of them. And so I had a fraternity brother of mine, still one of my dearest friends, Jim Hubbard, who was working for New York Life. And I called up Hubbard and I said, listen, I am literally sitting on a gold mine. I didn't know it before, but now I'm walking it, I'm living it, and it's very real. And then my first social friend really in Fort Worth, or one of them, was Michael Parks. And Michael was working for Mass Mutual, and I called him and gave him the exact same spiel that I gave Hubbard. And then there was one other whose name I won't mention to protect the innocent. But I went to all 3 of them and said, guys, I need to build out an employee benefit business because I'm a property casualty guy. It's not the way my brain's wired. And so they literally started formally our life and health business. And that actually started, Jim joined me in April of 89 and Michael November of 89. So now we kind of had this 3-legged stool. property casualty on the business insurance side, property casualty on the personal insurance side, and now life and health, which was really predominantly employee benefits. I mean, they would still dabble in quote unquote life insurance sales, but they became, and they are truly probably two of the best employee benefit brokers to this day in the country. But that's now a huge part of our business, which we'll save for a little bit later. But what kind of our new gig, if you were, we were kind of new in town. None of us, Michael was from Fort Worth, and you've been in Fort Worth, this very kind of, we might let you in, we may not. So you had a boy grew up in Mobile, grew up most of his younger years in Texarkana, went to school at North Texas, so not TCU. You had a boy from Dallas, went to North Texas, right? Not from Fort Worth. And then we had, all of us, and Michael, who actually grew up in Fort Worth, did go to TCU. So that kind of probably helped us a little bit, but none of us have been in the business long at all. Yeah. I mean, and we just literally began to go out and call on people and tell our story, and began to see really early success. We would see that, I think, people, and then we were young. I mean, so in 89, we're all 27 years old. And I'd been at it since I was 26. I mean, Bill Stroud, I won't use names to protect the innocent, but his largest client brought in a CFO, and they just were like Clash of the Titans. And he's like, "This is your client, Rusty. Don't mess it up." And I'm like, holy cow, this is our largest client, and you're handing it to me to preserve, you know? But that's because of that early opportunity, that early training, and probably being thrown a bit to the wolves, we just started calling on people. And fortunately, all of us were very competitive. None of us were scared of hard work. And we really saw really early signs of success, in the sense of we'd call on a client and they'd hire Higginbotham. And the only issue we were running into is a lot of people knew, and these companies have now long since sold and gone, but the Brandt's Company or William Rigg, they knew those names, but Higginbotham, they didn't know who that was. And again, another epiphany light bulb went off. I picked up a client by the name of Ford Sign Company. And I said, and this is back when we were at 260 Bailey. And I said, listen, it's Bill's building, so I got to do what he approves. But I said, I want the biggest sign you can put on that building. It was a 2-story building. It's now the Cutting Horse building. But I said, I want Higginbotham across the top. And then I want to get in the arts and other programs, and I'm gonna make us look big. We're going to stand out in the parking lot and spread all out. We're going to take a picture that'll show the building as if we occupied all of it. By the way, we only occupied like 4,500 square feet. And then I'm going to have it spread out so it looks like there's a lot of us. But over time, that we kept that same look and feel for quite a while. And over time, that parking lot got really full. And so, hence it meant we were gaining a little traction.
I freaking love that. My story of that is when I was a one-person company, there was a service called Grasshopper. And basically the way it worked is you would connect it to your phone, but if you were to call me, you would say it would answer an answering machine. Hey, it's Fort Capital. For 1, press accounting. For 2, press. So you felt they all led to me.
Yeah.
But it was perception is reality. Yeah. And I rode that for a couple of years, and people were like, who run your accounting department? Me. Who runs your acquisitions department? Me.
Oh, yeah.
So
I've been there.
It works.
Where was Grasshopper back in my day?
I know.
Yeah.
That was the Grasshopper. Yeah. Just put a big sign and scatter people.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you started early on, were you growing through basically bringing new lines of insurance in, or had you started acquiring companies?
No, we did bring in, like, I remember I had not been here that long, and we brought in the likes of a guy named Carl Brumley, wonderful man. And sadly, most of these folks are gone.
Yeah.
Brought in a guy named Bill Ryan. Brought in 92, I remember Eddie Ryan and Clay Berry's firm, Thomas M. Ryan and Company, brought in a guy named Don Lance that worked for Aon, Birch Coates, who was one of the founders of Coach something. I can't even remember the name of their firm. And then Doug Dickerson of Dickerson, Little and Fitzgerald. So we did, in today's vernacular, they would call those tuck-in acquisitions. But really it was more recruiting them to kind of join us. And then almost in a parallel path and Rodney Johnson, who I can't dare forget, love Rodney, still comes to the office regularly. But also in a kind of a parallel path, we were also recruiting a lot of young people. So just people that, were kind of today we've kind of formalized, we call them rookies. If you've been in your first job and you're now ready to try job number 2. And so we brought in a lot of wonderful people so we were kind of doing some really kind of tuck-in acquisitions, which was a little complicated with the ESOP. Early on, the ESOP, you had a lot of shares that you could kind of allocate their direction. Once all those shares were allocated, then I was giving up my share interest to give some to you, just to join us. So that's where we began to think about how do we kind of bring back the transfer of ownership, is why one of the reasons why we said, let's buy out the ESOP. But we really kind of a combination of, and I think the headlines, if you read all the headlines, you'd go, well, all Higginbotham does is acquire companies and that's how they grow. But the truth of the matter is it's very measured growth. It's very much a dual growth strategy. We grow organically as much as we do from an acquisition perspective. So as an example, if I look at calendar year 2023, we wrote about $94 million in new revenue, and we acquired about $100 million. So it's, and I always laugh, particularly, if you look at our kind of M&A teams, I think some people think that's a team of like a whole department. There's like 5 of us. And I always say, and I'm stealing this from one of our partners that I forgot to mention earlier. We have a chief partners officer, David Fischel. And Fish, as we called him, brought it up one day. He goes, the facts of the matter is that we've got 5 of us that are focused on M&A, but the other, at that time, we had 3,000 employees. So the other 2,995 are worried about, basically writing new clients and taking darn good care of the ones we got. And so that's really kind of what happens today.
All right, we're going to get into M&A in a second. I just want to go back real quick. What do you think you've learned over the years just about recruiting? Because you've successfully recruited, like you just went through a laundry list of people. What do you know about recruiting that maybe somebody doesn't know?
So I will tell you, I love citing Jim Hubbard. He gets a lot of credit for this philosophy. So back when, I would tell you that we recruited a young man and it was an absolute disaster. Both on an interpersonal level, the guy individually was a mess. And I remember one day Jim came into my office, pounding the table and go, "That's it, Reid, man. If they don't pass the Thanksgiving test, we don't need him as a partner." And I'm listening because he's just venting. He's mad as a hornet, and he'd given this guy opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and the guy just would fail and fail and fail, and a bunch of stuff I won't go into in great depth. But and I finally stopped him and say, "Hey, Hub, time out. Thanksgiving test." He goes, "If you can't have Thanksgiving dinner with them, why the hell do you want him as a partner?" And I was like, you know what? That makes all the sense in the world. So I will tell you, we kind of have an approach, and we do this even with acquisitions today. Get the people part right first. Unlike buying a building or, building a manufacturing plant or oil and gas. I mean, in our business, our assets go up and down the elevator every day, and you got to get the people dynamic right. If you don't, it will fail miserably. Yep. And so Jim I forget what year that happened, but he kind of set that pace for us. And then I would just tell you, to this day, I mean, we sit there and say, we use the Thanksgiving test, but really one of our values is being family to our employees. Well, we all have family. We all have family members that we go, wish that one really wasn't our family, but he's family, so I'm going to have to include him, and then I got this one over here that is my family, and I'm glad they're my family. And so we really do focus a lot on hiring the right people. And a lot of that is just people that you can get along with. I mean, we spend so much time at work, oftentimes more than we did our families at home. And so, by God, be with people you enjoy being with. Yeah. And I've just been blessed. Nobody told me, "Rusty, you can't hire friends." Nobody told me, you can't hire this guy because you really like him, or this lady because you really enjoyed the interview. We've really tried to keep it. If you get along with people, then dig in and try to figure out what knowledge base do they have, what, what do they, maybe are they hard workers, et cetera. And it's funny, later in life, you read books like from, Jack Welch, and he's always like, you hire somebody, maybe they don't know as much, but they work hard and they believe in the vision and mission versus a prima donna that might bring in zillions of dollars, but they're a nightmare for you. Right. And so, I would tell you, we try to get the people right first, particularly on the sales side of the equation. So for those that are helping us not only maintain clients, but also bring in new clients, we actually have developed a test around that. And that test it's a personality profile, but it's really specific. And it's been basically built around 20 of us individually within the firm. So we're not trying to mirror architect with somebody that's in the insurance sector, right? We're talking not only insurance sector, but people within Higginbotham that have enjoyed long, careers and successful careers from that perspective. And it's been interesting. If you bring in a candidate and they take the exam and you can share it with them, they'll look at that and go, yeah, that's 100% me. And it's an easier conversation to go, well, you can see you score very low on things like persistency or things like call reluctancy or things that you're going to have, building relationships. So help us understand why you might want to be a salesperson here, right? Yeah. You don't have the attributes. By comparison, there might be some things that jump off the charts that you go, wow, this person's got a servant mentality. They don't want to be the front person, but man, they'll take great care. So guess what? Not hire them for sales, but let's maybe bring them over here and put them in the support side. So we've gotten a lot more scientific. Our gut still is a really good indicator, but not only with, again, hiring all new hires, I encourage all of our folks, hire people that their reputation, their reputation with clients, their reputation with their colleagues, their reputation in the community. That's who you want to be on the team. Because as we all know, as our grandparents always told us, one bad apple will spoil the whole bunch. And there's a lot of truth and wisdom to that. Yeah. So I guess I would just tell you, macro, we're very intentional about getting the right people on the bus.
Did you hire someone to create that test for you, or is it culture index?
We ultimately did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We ultimately did. We went through a couple that we're like, they're wrong industry. And I'm making this up, but it will illustrate the point. They're a client relationship person for a bank, but we're not, no offense to our banker friends, but many of them are there to take orders from people that call upon them. Yeah. And we're very much going out to call upon clients. So it took us a little while to get that right, but we did. It's a grind. I might tell you, it's a company called Pop 7. And I've actually got a number of my clients, and I serve on a publicly traded board. I've got a number of people. I'm like, listen, if you're a people-centric business, you need to focus, you build your profile, which is going to be unique to you and your company, but build your profile, and that's what you ought to measure against. And I know there's all kinds of other testing, et cetera, that goes on. But for us, at least identifying talent that's going to succeed, been an awesome test.
Amazing. We use Culture Index. We have for 5 or 6 years. I have not heard of Pop 7. I'll have to look at that. You said core value family to our employees. The counter to that might be, are you sure you want your employees getting close and knowing too much about each other? Yeah. What do you say to that?
I would tell you, if you're bringing the right people in, then absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing I would tell you is, I think, and I've learned this from, again, all my partners. I know what my strengths are and I know what my weaknesses are. I'd much rather work with somebody where I know what their strengths are, they know what my strengths are, and they know what my weaknesses are, and they're not going to use it against me. Yeah. They're going to treat me because they love me. Yeah. And it really warms my heart when I talk, and I spend a lot of time in the field or talking to people that are in the field on a regular basis, when they're like, man, so-and-so was having a bad day. And that bad day, like I had a young lady come in my office the other day. I started crying. She's like, I just want to tell you, because you had family night at the rodeo, my grandfather got to go. It was the first time he'd ever been to the rodeo. He's watched on television for years, and unfortunately he passed away. And so the last picture I have with him was him and me at the rodeo. And if it wasn't for what you did and open it up to all family members, that wouldn't have happened. So guess what? not only is she, and I didn't do this for this reason, but she's like, I love Higginbotham. She goes, I'll do everything. Her and her granddad were very, very close. And so she's like, I want to be, I'm here for you, Rusty. Whatever we need, I'm going to, in my power, do it, And so I think when you think about family, it's like building the right culture. Now, as we all know, you got families that are very destructive. So we also, there's kind of a right way to act and a wrong way to act. And if you're acting the wrong way, we're going to be the first to kind of point that out. And that might mean you might have the skill set, but if you can't play nice in the sandbox, go to a place where that maybe doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's very interesting. Our turnover, I just got this report the other day. So both our voluntary and our involuntary turnover is like 7%. So it's de minimis. And I just say it's, you can talk about having a great culture. You got to live that culture, and you got to be proactive about that culture.
Sure.
And so, that's a message. And I love particularly our younger leaders, man, they are so much better at that. Well, as you know, I'm 41, but for those that are like in their 60s, it's hard for them to sometimes wrap their brain around the importance of culture and treating people with respect and just going the little extra mile. I mean, those are the things that to be a good family member. And I would even say it's being a good corporate family member. I do think there's a distinction, if you will, but it's something that we really encourage our folks to really try to live. And I think our lady that kind of runs our marketing is Lady Lane Gallagher, and I'm going to give her all this credit. She's literally done a great job in all of our offices. Now we're putting up what our values are on the walls where they're most crowded. And it's like the other day I was on a call with one of our young leaders, Carter English, who runs our San Antonio office. And he was on there with Jake Kirkpatrick, Go Frogs, the Remington Award winner, Andy Dalton Center. He runs our Austin office. Both of them are young men, mid 30s, if you will. And everything, when they talk to their respective teams, they always start every conversation in around values. And then they go through and literally reward on I can't remember if it's a monthly, quarterly basis, but it's pretty frequent. They go try to seek out, okay, who in the operation is actually living the values and do a public acknowledgement around that, and that can be doing something for the community, that could be doing something for a fellow colleague, et cetera. So, that's that grassroots. You got to kind of lay out the vision, and then you got to have people that, won't just talk about, well, didn't you read the wall? But really make examples of why that matters. And so they help live it and illustrate it much better than I'll ever articulate it.
Culture is what you're willing to accept.
That's right.
At the end of the day,
that's right.
It's not the top of your company. It's where it's what you're willing to kind of let get away with at the bottom.
That's right.
It's hard. I can only imagine with 3,000 employees and when you're buying companies left and right. So we're going to move into that.
Yep.
So when did you said we did tuck in, but when did you officially buy your first company?
So we got very intentional. So the first transaction was we kind of bought ourselves. So we sold the ESOP basically to the same people that owned the ESOP before, except at that time we brought in a minority capital partner.
And for an idiot, what does that actually mean? How do you sell something to yourself?
Well, so they literally, the owner was an ESOP. So here's this company that's wrapped up in an ERISA plan, had a trustee that really voted all the shares ultimately for, I might have been the largest shareholder in the ESOP, but really the ultimate vote was the trustee.
Okay.
And so we turned around and said, okay, we want to buy out. So the ESOP trustee's going, okay, we'll let you buy this out, but we're going to go get a fair market valuation. We got to make sure you can definitely buy it out. I can't, as a trustee, you're much like a trustee of an estate, you're responsible for the well-being of the people that are within that trust. In this case, it's a bunch of employee shareholders.
Right.
So we literally, we as a group over here, and everybody in that plan, at that time, there was 206 employees. Everybody could either take cash or they could take a portion of cash and buy stock or roll chips in. Probably the biggest mistake I'd made was I diversified my balance sheet. I wish I'd have just kept all my chips in. I'm still the largest shareholder, but I mean, it could really be something exciting. But anyhow, so we literally, and to kind of bridge the delta between what we could, write a check for and what was left over, we needed a capital partner to help fill that slot. And we started with a group called Allied Capital out of Washington, D.C., which I'll tell you was our second choice. Our first choice was a group called StonePoint. And I think we kind of went back with an ask, really not even around dollars, more around how important the promote was. And I probably didn't do a good job, or our investment banker didn't do a good job of explaining we need a big promote because we're going to spread it amongst the entire company, not just a handful of people. And so Allied kind of got in a bad way when the financial crisis hit in 2008 and 2009. And so they came to us and said, hey, we're not selling Hig because you're bad. We need to sell our interest in Hig because we got to raise money because we got caught in a bad situation in a unitranche fund where they were investors. And so we said, look, we'll try to do so. I mean, you can't force us to do it. So we'll try to do so. And we were successful in buying them out. And at that point, we brought in StonePoint. So StonePoint's been our minority partner now since literally December of 2009. But the first group we bought was a group, Allred, Thompson, Mason, and Daugherty in Wichita Falls, January 1st of 2008.
Really?
So there you go. Yeah.
Okay. So real quick. So you got to the decision to sell the ESOP basically to private equity with another ESOP.
Well,
is that what you call it?
Think of it, two shareholders, the Higginbotham employee group.
Yep.
And then we needed somebody to fill the gap. That could have been debt. That could have been a private equity firm. And in this case, Allied Capital was actually a BDC. So they were a publicly traded BDC, which stands for Business Development Corp. And their job really primarily was to be a long-term lender. Where they got in trouble is they got outside of their skis and started playing in the equity game, which they weren't good at. Yeah. They hadn't done it before. And so that's what got them in trouble.
And the shareholders in I'll call it Higginbotham 1, you said had the ability to take cash. If they took the cash, did they also become stockholders in the new deal?
No, the only
would they have stayed with the company then?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. We didn't say.
So you don't have to be part of an ESOP if you work at an ESOP.
Correct.
Okay,
right. Yeah,
that's
they were an employee shareholder. They couldn't be an ESOP owner if they didn't work at Higginbotham. So when we bought out, it's because it's truly an employee stock ownership plan and trust. So you had to be an employee to be a shareholder. Now we could have sold a part of the company to any third party shareholder if we elected to. For us, it was. Then you get into different tax nuances, dry income to the shareholders, et cetera. So
what's dry income?
Meaning maybe that we made a profit. Well, the ESOP wouldn't have to pay taxes because think of it, we're almost like in an IRA or a 401k.
Yeah.
But for you, the third party, that profit, we'd send you a K-1 and now you'd have tax on that. Yet I'm not sending you cash to pay the tax.
Got it.
So it was a great time we had this vision. My CFO and partner, who's our CFO today, Jim Krause, and I. So funny. We'd sit in at late nights. We'd sit in my office or his and start talking about everybody wants to buy Higginbotham. If we got our structure right, instead of people wanting to buy us, and we were at that time in what was it been 2009? I guess I was 47, maybe. No, sorry. When we monetized 07, I was 45 when we monetized the ESOP. So I'm like, I'm not ready to retire at all. Matter of fact, I feel like I'm just hitting my stride, right? Yeah. And so it was kind of a vision to build what we called at that time the best in Texas. So I had this vision to where we wanted to be the best place for our employees to work, best client advocate, best carrier partner and community partner, and kind of stealing a chapter maybe out of the Frost playbook. We were kind of operating with the notion that Texans enjoy doing business with Texans. Yeah. And so by God, we're ready to we're ready to hit the street. And so we started literally knocking on doors of either people I knew or other people within our firm that might have known folks in different agencies that had reputationally, again, Thanksgiving test, had really good reputations in their respective market. And again, the first one out of the gate was Reid Thompson Mason Darty. That was a very, very well-known firm. And one of our gentlemen, a guy named Sam Hulse, who is in our 401k business, said, "Oh yeah, I used to know these guys are great." And so we met with them, and that was out of the gates number one. And then found ourselves in Houston with a group called Madison Benefits. They were literally probably the best boutique employee benefit provider in that part of the state. And I mean, it just kind of became infectious, if you will. So that's how we kind of began to build out the state, if you will.
All right. So I'm going to go back one more time and then we'll get back.
Yeah, no worries.
So you had this vision. You said, we're going to start going on offense and we're going to start buying. We're not going to sell. We're going to buy. So I'd imagine, was that probably 2006, 2000?
Yeah, 2006, it really began to get some real legs. It's like and I probably left out an important piece here. So it's by 2006, 2007, we'd gone, again, I'll go way back to the beginning of my time at Higginbotham. Nobody knew who we were. So now we're the second largest broker in the state of Texas, under John L. Wortham in Houston. Okay. And
you're coming for them.
And we're coming for them. And that's even bigger than folks like in the Dallas market. Still a dear friend. I have tremendous respect for a guy named Bill Henry, who built Macquarie Henry. Great business operator, great human being. And here we are in little old Fort Worth, and we've built not only we built the second largest, but we're growing leaps and bounds organically compared to our peers. And so, as you can imagine, any of the acquirers and suitors at that time, I'm not exaggerating, Chris. I bet you I was getting a call a week. Hey, we want to come talk to you. Want to come talk to you. Want to come talk to you. And I'm just like, why would I may not be a rocket scientist, but you're going to buy me and I'm done, but I grow 20+% a year. How am I going to capture that growth? Well, we'll give you a big upfront multiple. Yeah, but that's then done. How do I, Rule 72 tells me I'm going to double every 3.6 years. So how do I double that? The market ain't going to do that for me, right? So it just, all indicators kept coming back to, we need to do this ourselves. And I love how you put it. We need to get on the offensive side of the ball, not play defense, if you will.
So you, and real quick, I'm just sidebar on that. Do you ever worry about the market, the economy? Because you say like we grow 20% a year. That was obviously in 2007.
Yeah.
You were about 18 months away from catastrophe, at least in the market. You don't think that way?
Here's how my brain works,
okay.
and rightly or wrongly, and maybe again, some of the tragedy I lived through in my life, life will continue.
Yeah.
Maybe at the moment you don't think it will, but it does continue. And I remember when I joined American General, it was right after one of the hurricanes, and I'm literally the first day on the job, and they're talking about losing all this money, and if they don't make, if they don't improve and they're going to be gone, right? And all of a sudden, a year later, everything's back to normal. They're making huge underwriting profits, et cetera. I remember in the late 80s, the savings and loan crisis. Literally, the group that financed our ESOP transaction in '89 was First City. They were like in receivership 6 months later.
Oh.
I mean, I think if you've got a sound business and a sound business model, you can control what you control, and you can not control what you don't control. That sounds really silly, but to put context around that, I can't control the market cycles, hard market, soft market. I can't control the economy. Is it a good economy? Is it a bad economy? I can't control. What I can control is take really good care of my people, take really good care of my clients, and really be great partners with my insurance companies. So they're also there locking arms with me during good times and bad times. And now, it's interesting. I think the mega test for all of us was COVID. And I don't know if it was stupidity, back to Bill's comment around children and idiots, or if it was courage or maybe just wisdom. but I remember telling our CFO, I mean, he said, "Oh, we need to cut out." I said, "We're not going to change anything we did." I said, "I've never lived through a national crisis like this ever, but I know the last time this happened, the world we're walking on today is still around, and the people are still around. And so a global pandemic can't predict the tenure of that. But my suspicion is that with medical technology, somebody's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if they don't, guess what? There's some Bible verses that say it's time to move on, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just keep operating. And I remember my partner at StonePoint called me up and he goes, "I know you're going to laugh when I ask this, but we're stress testing. So what's your worst case scenario?" And I said, "Flat."
Yeah.
And he, "No, you're not down 20 or 30%. I said, my instincts are we're going to be up because we're not changing. Businesses aren't going out of businesses. Right now, restaurants are having a hard time. Right now, the hospitality industry's having a tough time. But I talked to my banker clients. They're doing well. My real estate clients are like, they're waiting to know when they get back on the job, but they're about to jump back on the job. So are my construction clients, et cetera." By the way, still at that time, a big chunk of our firm, more than half, is in Texas. We're growing like a weed. If we were on an economy, we'd be the 9th or 10th largest in the world. So, and by the way, I was more right than that. We ended up having a great year, but much higher than there. I think they were like, "Well, we're thinking all of our investments are going to be down 20%. And I, rightly or wrongly, I laughed at that. Yeah. But the only reason why I did is it goes back to, I've seen the S&P or the savings and loan. I've seen the real estate boom and bust, oil boom and bust, multiple. You talk about George being on your deal. Look at George. I mean, multiple boom and bust. You just learn how to go, I'm going to be smart around that. I know it's there, but I'm going to run a great business. And in his world, that probably means I'm going to buy when everybody else is selling, and then I'm going to sell when everybody else begins to buy, right? And so I think from our perspective, we just kind of steady Eddie, if you will, because our industry, I mean, the market was extraordinarily soft for a long time. I mean, it peaked when another date I remember very well, obviously, was when 9/11 happened, right? And that year, the market spiked, and literally over the next 18 months, it got soft again and even got lower. And I'm talking in terms of insurance pricing. Yep. So I've always said, what we need to focus more on is great retention rate of existing clients and always growing organically. Yeah. Those are the things we can control. And if we control that, we'll weather most storms.
I love it. There's a lot of wisdom in that. All right. So you had the vision. You said, we're going to go raise some private equity to go on offense. You got to StonePoint initially in 2009. Did you actually know how to buy companies at that point?
Yeah, I'll give some kudos to my partner, Jim Krause, too. I mean, I did a lot of the early on tuck-ins, so I knew how to identify, how to price it out right. He kind of grew up in that world, so we are then and are now a great team from kind of an M&A perspective. Now that team has expanded. We got some incredible young talent. We've got, again, David Fischel, who does a great job on the business development, identifying who's out there that we should partner with. Internally, we've got Wes Snow, who's a dynamo on the finance side. We got a great young man named John Ledyard, who's incredible in terms of kind of integrating. We're not just buying revenue for the sake of buying revenue. They do become Higginbotham, so they're all completely integrated in. And so he kind of holds their hand till we get to the point of, they're integrated on our agency management system, kind of think our back office system, if you will. So there was a period of time, kind of like you said, you'd press 1, 2, or 3, and it was all coming to you. There was a time where it was 1, 2, 3, it was all coming to me, but we've now got some really great folks, and it just, ironically, they're all really young, and they do an incredible job for us.
So do you mostly know the businesses you want to go buy, or are they just kind of coming into you and you're just surprised, oh, we didn't know this one was here?
Most of the time, David Fischel is really, really good at his craft. Okay. And most of the time, he already knows who they are. He's probably already developed a relationship with the principals. Most of the time, these companies that have joined us through acquisition, we call them partners, but legal form acquisition, most of the time, they aren't for sale. And we've just presented the fact that our value proposition is such, something they may consider. We've now reputationally, we do get opportunities from investment bankers that kind of know why is Higginbotham different. You can have robust employee ownership. We've got a great toolbox of goodies that make them a better broker. We're controlled by our employees. We've kind of built the business to last. So we view it as a legacy business. And so there are certain sellers that go kind of, if you think about it from this perspective, and I'm stealing again one of my partner's quotes, but I love it. He said, when I didn't sell to Higginbotham, I bought in, and so, so that's really the kind of what we don't buy is somebody that says, hey, I'm just ready to hang up my cleats. I mean, naturally in our world, if you think about retention as one of the elements that make it long-term, last for you, if you will, and you believe it's a relationship business, if the guy or lady is saying, I'm just hanging up my cleats, and there's not a perpetuation plan in and around that individual's book of business, then you just bought something that just disappeared on you. Right. Yeah. And so we really we don't buy it, and we're not a fix-it company. I know there's a strategy out there to go find folks that are in trouble and they need help and go fix them and then, pretty up the pig to get them sold. That's not our model either. We buy really, really great businesses and people that just, for whatever reason, maybe they want to monetize a portion of their lifelong work. Maybe they're at a crossroads where they're like, God, we're going to have to pour a lot of money into investing in technology or bringing on, attorneys for contract review or whatever it may be. And they're at a crossroads and they're like, but we're not really ready to give up. And we want to know that our investment can continue to grow post transaction. We become a very great option for them. And the other thing I would tell you that's unique about Higginbotham is we're producing executives. I mean, prior to coming here, I was actually on a client call. So we're in the game. It's not like we're sitting over on 500 West 13th Street, and all these little, Indians are out running around, et cetera. Every one of our managing directors that are running offices, every one of our managing partners that are effectively running regions, which is mostly now a state or a specialty practice, their day job is selling and servicing insurance clients. Yep. So I think that also, back to culture, you're not just, when I walk down the hall, they're not looking at, well, that's sorry dog, we're just doing this for him. I ask some of my partners, who's there late every night working hard, and who's the guy that if you say I need help, will get back to you immediately. And that is the culture of Higginbotham, to lend that helping hand when everybody's in need, not to say, well, I'm past that, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, you said something before we started recruiting, and you just kind of hit on it, but you said, I'm good when I have more things to juggle, which I thought was really interesting. I know you're only 41. Look 31, but you're 41.
Yeah, don't let the gray hair fool you, right? Yeah.
But at your stage of your career, a lot of folks sitting in that chair would say, I'm at a point where I'm not in as long, I'm delegating more, I'm just kind of supervising. And you just kind of said, I've always been someone that has a lot going on. Can you maybe explain what that means?
Yeah.
Or why you think
well,
that?
Again, I'm stealing this from some of our colleagues, but you want to get something done. Oftentimes you want to give it to the person that's the busiest. Yeah. Right. Because they know they got to jump on it, get it done, and then keep going back to whatever had them going. Right. And so I call it adult ADD. I don't know what the, legal term or diagnostic term may be, but I've always operated best when I have a lot of balls in the air. Yeah. Now that being said, I mean, we've gone from, being a firm that was doing, when we took over, $1,288,000 in revenue to, we'll see $1 billion of revenue in the next year or two. And so it takes a lot more to do what we used to do individually. But I love it. And then I will tell you, there's real wisdom to being my age, 41 and younger. The youth factor at Higginbotham has always been very vibrant, and it is today. And youth, youth bequests youth, right? I think when you're around a lot of young, energetic, high energy, but good moral values, et cetera, man, you can't help but it's infectious. And I've just, it's funny. We host every year what's called the HLC, Higginbotham Leadership Conference. And ironically, I was on a call and I'm running late. This program's about to begin. And I'm walking down the aisle, and on this side of the aisle, there's these 50 and 60-year-olds. And on this side of the aisle, there's these folks that are in their, 30s and early 40s. Which way do you think I turned?
Yeah.
I went and sat with them, right? I'm not the guy that's going to sit there and go, oh God, not another HLC, and so I think, from my perspective, I love what I do. Interesting enough, and I'll brag a little bit about StonePoint. So their CEO, Chuck Davis, one of the greatest men I've ever met. And I was on a phone call with him today. I mean, he's in the game, and he won't want me and probably mention his age, but he's the same age as Higginbotham, and he's in it every day. And I love that. So, I think, and here's the truth. I mean, some people aren't wired that way. And so if they get to a place where they're done, the worst thing you can do is stick around, because now you set the example of everybody to follow, and you're not happy, you're grumpy, you're not energetic, you're not uplifting, et cetera. So I think if it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, just means you're wired. Maybe there's wisdom why retirement was 65, right?
Yeah.
There's probably more people jump off than jump back in. Yeah. But I also, having enjoyed grandparents that lived well into their mid 80s and 90s, they were all very active people. And it was always funny to hear them talk about their friends that weren't very active and how pitiful they were and don't do anything, et cetera. So, losing dad at a young age, they kind of stepped in as my parents, so to speak. And so, and I had two sets of wonderful grandparents. And so you just kind of look at that and go, when I'm that age, I want to be doing what they're doing at that age. My granddad, literally, Granddad Reid, at age 84 is working on the roof on our family farm, falls through it, lands on the floor, drives himself from think basically Commerce, Texas, drives himself to Greenville, Texas, to use the phone to call me and say, meet me at Baylor Hospital. I think I'm really hurt, but don't tell your grandmother. Gets to Baylor Hospital, come to find out he broke his sternum, right? But here's a guy that, back up a little bit, 84, is out. He had a herd of cattle he took care of and liked to do the handyman chores. Needless to say, after that, we didn't let him go on the roof ever again, right? But I think you're just wired that way, right? You either want to stay in the game or not. Yeah. And I'm just one that enjoy. I as you can tell, I like doing this. If I'm not good at it, though, by the way, it's okay. I'm really good at sales. Let me just be a producer. We'll let somebody else worry about the CEO job.
All right, going back to M&A, this is for me. How at a high level do you value an insurance business? So when one comes in, here's the first question. What's an immediate no? You kind of said if they're not in it, if they don't want to keep growing. But aside from that, let's say it's somebody that actually wants to keep going. They have all the people issues. From a pure financial standpoint, or what are other things where you'd be like, yeah, this just isn't going to work?
So we really all are about relationships, and there's parts of the country where we just don't think relationships matter. It's probably more transactional.
Okay.
So we'll say no geographically. The exception to that geographic might be a specialty practice. So, for example, we have an incredible life and executive compensation team that's housed out of California. We probably won't build out a robust brokerage business out there. Now, we've got a great support team, and we've got an incredible team that's focused on a certain vertical, but that's an area of the country that, due to regulation and some other things, it makes it more difficult to operate the business like we operate today. We won't. It might be a great business, but if it's not kind of in the retail brokerage sector or a business that can support the retail brokerage sector, we're going to pass.
Got it.
And we get lots of looks at a lot of things. If it's a business where it's very obvious that the relationships of the client are controlled by an individual, and that individual is going to get a check and head to the farm,
Yep.
we're out. I mean, we've got to see a clear path, if you will, to perpetuation of those clients.
Yep.
We're not a fix-it firm. So if the industry average for organic growth is a certain percent and they're just not growing, I mean, they might have reputationally a great business. We're just going to be the wrong buyer for them. We want to see somebody that has growth. So there are criteria. And then, of course, the Thanksgiving test. And by the way, that's the top box. If we literally meet with every single party that we acquire, multiple times. And so if for example, and this has happened, you might have a party, and I'll just leave the names off to protect the innocents, that says, hey, we're divesting in this particular market. But we can't, they're treating it like a cattle sale. We're going to sell this business, but we can't let anybody internally know. We're out. We want to make sure that they want to join us too. Right. And so if we can have that interaction to really get our arms wrapped around, hey, they're as excited about us buying them as they are joining us, then we're out. And sadly, that happens in our industry quite a bit. People show up on a Friday and they've either got a box to fill because they're gone, or they got a note saying, hey, your new employer is X. And that's just, I've been maybe overly transparent, but I think when you deal with the people dynamic in our industry, you can't do it that way. So those are a few nuggets.
That's a few nuggets. Okay, so it passes all the sniff test. How, if we're just doing math, how is it generally valued? Just a percent or a multiple on cash flow?
It's the way to generally think about it is, yes, it's multiple cash flow. In our industry, EBITDA would be the norm because we're we're not a capital intensive business.
Right.
And we have what you have here, desk and computers and
people
what,
going up and down the
that's
elevator.
right. But we don't have to, we don't have a lot of CapEx requirements. And so you really can almost look at EBITDA is the right multiple or the right, thing to look at. And then you apply a multiple to that. And the multiple really depends upon kind of the size, the growth, maybe the product mix, that kind of thing. I mean, you as you dig in a little deeper, you don't want to look and go, wow, that's great. They're doing $5 million of revenue. Oh my God, it's tied to one account.
Yeah.
So there is some in-depth underwriting that you have to do, but it's typically a multiple of EBITDA.
How long does due diligence usually take y'all?
Oh, we can, from the beginning in, we're pretty, our teams, I'd say they are doing the heavy lifting on this, but we can knock something out and really feel we know the business within a 60-day period.
Okay. We really haven't talked about day two. I might get there in a second, but on the M&A front, how many businesses have you bought to date?
So between books
partnered with,
books of businesses. So think individual to firms north of 100. But again, that's since our intentionality in 2007 when we said, okay, we're going to launch our Best in Texas. So, that's over a 17-year period. And if you divide that out, it's not like we're, buying a zillion of companies a year. Now, because David Fischel is so good at what he does, that number is getting larger and larger each year, not smaller and smaller. Honestly, north of a dozen, let's put it that way.
I was going to say, you can say whatever you want. I just did quick math in my head. That's basically one individual or company every 2 months for 15 years straight.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay. So you make a deal, price is right, everything's checked. What does integration look like? That's, to me, I've never bought a company, or at least for ingested another team.
Right.
What happens the day you close?
So a couple things. We don't just say employee ownership is important. It's a requirement. So the selling shareholder or shareholders, we oftentimes want them and almost require them to take a portion of their proceeds. And like my dear friend Stuart Ferguson said, I'm buying in. We want them to buy in and buy our stock.
Yeah.
To me, Rusty Reid, that I'm not asking you to do anything different than I did in 2007 when I was the CEO of Higginbotham selling the ESOP, but over here I was buying the business again, if you will. And I want it to be material. So that has to happen or will pass. That was another piece. But immediately day one, they have access to everything that we have available. So our day two services, which is our risk management and a benefit administration offering, are generally speaking, most of our insurance companies they now have access to. We have a number of specialty practices. So, think real estate, life sciences, nonprofit, construction, energy. I mean, there's 36 of them. They have access to their expertise to help them on prospects and or clients. Immediately, they're on our email, phone system. They're on our payroll. We basically all HR function, IT function, and whatnot, financial function, we kind of take over, and really they become kind of the sales and service arm of their local market. Sometimes, depending on the size, that may take a little bit, but ultimately that's what happens. And then ultimately, they'll become our brand. I mean, unless there's just a specialty practice where for whatever nuance or reason, they shouldn't be Higginbotham. Maybe it sends a message wrong to the market. Maybe there's some channel conflict. I don't even know, but generally speaking, they're going to become Higginbotham. Kind of an interesting side note. I hear it from our employees all the time. The owners of those prior businesses, they always want to stay, their name, right? That's just, they want to stay their name, period. What's hilarious is all the employees, generally speaking, after a little time with Hig, they're like, when can we change our name to Higginbotham? Without exception, that happens. So the other thing that happens, and this is very unique, all employees now participate in our synthetic equity plan. So think of it like a stock option. So
outside of the ESOP or within the ESOP?
Well, there's not really an ESOP, but think of it as think of it, the employee, think of, you got the shareholder group, and 17.5% for all shareholders is a promote, and that gets sprinkled for me all the way down to the receptionist, if you will.
Got it.
And so for these employees, what's really cool is we honor, so you're an acquisition, we honor what your start date is with your prior employer. So they immediately start getting these things called HIG units. Now it's complicated. It's not. I mean, I could walk through the math and you go, I got it, but it's new for them, so they don't understand it. But you get through kind of one renewal cycle, then they can go online to ShareWorks and go, you mean I got this and that's what it's worth today? Yep, that's what it's worth today. Maybe subject to vesting or whatever. So it's truly an integrated firm. Now, what we won't do, we're there. I always call Higginbotham an opt-in business. I don't force any of this on anybody outside of IT integration. That has to happen. We've got to communicate. We got to leverage our data and look at it from a holistic view. But we want them to continue to hire people in their market. They know that better than us. We want them to recruit other firms. Maybe, live with us a little bit if you like what you see, which again, all have thus far. Then go tell your friends and family, right? Go recruit. Don't have me go find your partners. You go find your partners. That's kind of my saying. And then what's very unique with us is we intentionally want to add youth to the business. Today we have about 80 people in Higginbotham University, which is our kind of program to teach them insurance, give them an in-depth overview of kind of almost think of a in-depth introduction into all our goodies, so to speak. And we want to have a lot of people in there. Now, we don't want them to fail, so we're going to require to do the testing if they're going to sales and all that. And that's typically new. If you're a smaller operator and you hadn't had success in hiring these new people or young people, if you will, then you've always looked at that as, oh my God, but I spent $100,000 on the last 3 and only one of them made it. So I spent 200, plus only to make 100. And so I'm really not good at it. So if they'll follow our guidance there, we can turn that into have an 80+% success rate.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, but also, they've been through going through this transaction. There's true deal fatigue is real, right? And so we kind of try to stay away, but it's not like we're going to fly in the following Monday morning and take over.
Yeah.
We want them to, it's status quo, and then we're here. And then we provide a lot of opportunities for them to opt in, and those that opt in sooner start realizing, wow, they really are making a difference. Thank God we became a Higginbotham partner.
I love it. I wish I had a business to sell you. With StonePoint, you've been with them, what, 15 years?
15 years. Yeah. It would be at the end of this year, be 15 years.
That's not typical.
Very, very not. Yeah.
How does that work? You kind of call up, I don't know, I'm assuming they're probably in New York or some big city. Do you just call up and say, we got another one?
Well, interesting enough. So what they don't really, in our case, normally between the group that we're acquiring and what they're going to put in our stock, what an earnout might be. So kind of an amount we won't pay them until they effectively deliver what they said they had.
Yep.
And then our acquisition line facility, typically nobody has to write additional checks.
Oh, wow.
So really the role they've played for us has been, and they're outstanding at this, by the way. In our case, they're really helped. It's almost as if I have my built-in capital markets desk. Yeah. It's like I can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I'm, requiring a firm and it's going to cost me, $1 million. And I need to have a facility lined up so I can debt finance half of it or whatever the number might be. And they they're in the market in a big, big way. And so we get to effectively piggyback their expertise,
That's awesome.
If you will. And they know the role they play within our business too. They kind of get to enjoy our expertise in and around growing an insurance broker.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever heard from Buffett up in Omaha?
No, but I know many of. I've always said this. Now, this is very tongue in cheek. I'm going to say this, and everybody's going to panic. We're not for sale, but if we ever sold to anybody, that would be the person you'd want. So, because I remember listening to podcasts literally last week where he just talked about, we don't, it's all about the people. It's all about reputation. We can buy all the business in the world, but if we screw up on the reputational side, we'll knock out all the profit we would have ever made. And so what he does, obviously much better than we do, but he identifies great leadership teams. He identifies great businesses, and that's where he wants to park his capital till death do us part. And I know, because I've read enough about him, that he understands their market cycle. So he tries to identify businesses that aren't going to get crushed every time there's a market cycle. And to his credit, and you've read probably plenty of this as well, he only invests in things he understands. Yep. But as we know, he understands insurance.
I mean, at every annual meeting, it's all he talks about.
That's right.
I mean, not all, but Ajit Jain and what they've done. And it sounds a lot. I mean, I have read a lot on him, and it just sounds like two cultures that are actually honestly pretty aligned.
Yeah.
You're not for sale.
Yeah.
You only want to work with good people. You think long term. You grow 20% a year.
Yeah.
Kind of like he has.
Yeah. But again, I want to preface, we're not for sale. Period.
If you're listening to this, they're not for sale.
I'll have partners that listen to this and go, see, he's going to sell. No, the answer is no.
Warren, if you're listening to this, I
would like to meet him. That would be
cool.
Say.
That would be cool. Well, he owns a bunch of businesses in Fort Worth, BNSF, TTI.
Yeah. And all of them have spoken so highly of not only obviously him, but more importantly, the strategy behind what they have built, which is unbelievable.
I had to ask one thing. How do you think about AI?
Great question. So there's parts of our business within our agency management system that are already leveraging AI.
Yeah.
And I would tell you, AI is interesting, right? And I'm going to back up just a moment. So our whole industry, there was this big buzz in and around insurance tech. You heard every article you wrote, insurance tech, insurance tech, insurance tech, insurance tech. And a couple of years ago, I was at a conference and had a time to spend with the CEO of Travelers. And I said, it's kind of funny. This is the first conference. I'm not, thank God, having to hear about insurance tech. He goes, Rusty, let me explain to you our view, which I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. He said, there's elements, obviously, where being tech enabled is very important, but there was so much emphasis put on it. And he said, when the dust all settled, we'd apply elements of tools that were built, developed, et cetera. But then the cost for implementation and support, it didn't overall bring down our expense ratio. So we're out. He said, we're done. And so I would tell you, there's a lot of noise around that, no different than, again, .com boom and bust. I think there'll be elements of AI. I think they'll make us more adept to do maybe more with less, or hopefully the way I'm looking at it is fine. How can I be yet a better service provider to my client? How can I maybe streamline some of the hiring practices, et cetera? But I'm not going to do it at the risk of happenstance. So I think there's a lot of education. There's obviously tons of dollars flowing in this sector. Fortunately, I own NVIDIA stock and it's performed beautifully around this, right? But I still think there's a lot we don't know. But I think we'll learn over time. And again, I'm a retail broker serving clients. How can AI help us be a better service provider to our clients?
Yep.
And that's, does that mean, are there elements that can help us grow and not have to always throw warm bodies at it? Probably. And if so, let's make sure that we don't, again, do that at the detriment of being a good service provider.
Well, I'll say as a insurance buyer, it seems like we've been in a hard market for a while. I mean, I don't know the exact amount of years, but it's as a real estate owner, it is definitely
brutal.
It's brutal to the point where it's like, are we going to start a captive? Are we going to try and start our own insurance company? I mean, we're looking at every option. Do you think that AI could make insurance for the customers maybe cheaper because it's going to be able to provide more insight and data as to what's actually going on at the property or what's really happening? Or is
I would say anything, again, to be a service provider, a better service provider, which does include cost.
Yeah.
I would hope so. Data analytics, more specifically, is being used a lot today.
Yeah.
And it will continue, I think, to get more robust. But again, when you go back to InsurTech and the kind of boom and bust there, what happened at the insurance company level is their hope and desire was it would bring down their expense ratio. And maybe if you looked at it, okay, to issue a certificate, our cost went from here to here, but then our costs went up over here because we had to maintain that system. We had to have people that could, do the programming and so it ended up becoming cost neutral, in some cases more expensive. And so they abandoned that. But something I do think that certainly something needs to give on the industry. I'm glad to hear you bring up things like captives and whatnot. I mean, and again, I this came through a new partner, but the captive sector, 3 years ago for us was new. And today we have over 300 captives clients. And so it has become, when I talked about specialty practice, it's become a very important part of our business, particularly with companies that are doing all the right things. They're trying to run a safe operating environment. They're trying to maintain talk about real estate, maintain their facility. And that's the only way they can really get credits to help offset the otherwise upfront costs. And if they have a bad year, they understand they might have to pay a little bit. But if they have a series of great years, they should be getting that money back and then some, not all going to the insurance company. Right. So I think that's an area that we'll continue to see and hopefully kind of stays with us, doesn't just cycle and then uncycle. We were fortunate. We brought in a great new partner in Louisiana where the transportation industry at insurance level was just getting devastated. And he's like, all my clients mostly are in the trucking sector or have a big trucking presence within their operation. And the only solution where he could actually bring them a viable option was captive. So he kind of lived it through the eyes of, if I don't come up with the solution, I'm out of business. And so he came onto our platform 3 or 4 years ago now, and now he's our managing partner of all captive services. And again, we make a point when we go out and see a client, we're going to serve up what guaranteed cost options are out there, but also some of these alternative risk options, captive typically being the largest one that exists out there. So very, very real.
Yep. All right, I want to end it on this because it's, if I didn't know you, I would still know of you because of this one thing. It's around the word generosity. Higginbotham is everywhere in Fort Worth. You buy the steer at the rodeo. I mean, you're at the hospital system. So I thought maybe you could talk about your philosophy on generosity. Obviously, y'all are a big company with lots of resources at this point, but you were probably generous before you were a big company with lots of resources. So answer it in a way that any business owner could think, this is how I could be generous no matter how many resources I have, and no matter how the resources I have or not have.
Well, I'll first and foremost say this because any employee shareholder or third-party shareholder will actually appreciate this. So using the steer as an example, we actually bought that individually and through our Higginbotham Community Fund. So the operating entity, Higginbotham, didn't contribute a penny.
Okay.
And really, if I go back in time, I always, along with many of my partners, have always had kind of what I'll call their pet project that they loved and cared about. In my case, been a long-standing member of All Saints Episcopal School. You'll see if you go out there, Higginbotham signs all over the place. Higginbotham didn't pay a penny for any of those. It was Molly and Rusty Reid, but Higginbotham deserved the brand credit, not Rusty Reid and Molly Reid, right?
Yep.
Nor did we candidly personally want that.
Yep.
But what really, when I, and it's been in our mission, vision, and values forever to be generous to the communities we serve. And really that started more by, in my way of thinking, and this dates way back when. I remember William Blanchard and I went out and saw a client 20 plus years ago. And the client picked us up, stayed with the same program they were on, but hired us over the current broker they were with. And I just said to them, and by the way, that broke a great reputation. I was like, why us versus them? Kind of CEO to CEO, if you will. And he goes, Rusty, a couple things. Number one, y'all been persistent. I've checked reputationally. You've got a great reputation. But he said, I just love the fact you give back. We're a business that gives back as well. And we all receive so much from the communities we're in. It's almost like as a citizen, if you're profitable at all, it's almost like tithing. You need to give some to the church. And by the way, you need to give back some to the community.
Yeah.
And so I remember just leaving that meeting, going, wow, we need to make this really a strategic imperative for the firm. In a parallel path, I've told this story before. My dear friend David Miner, who was at the time, my largest client, kind of was recruiting me to get on the board of multiple sclerosis. And literally, as a professional, it was the first time I could see firsthand the difference you can make if you really kind of put your shoulder into it. It also was great. Again, young guy, it gave me some credibility with older folks where they saw, hey, this young guy's working as hard here as he is working over here to build this company. And so I just saw a lot of great things in and around generosity. But where we really changed the trajectory of who we are dates back to 2011. So we had a lady by the name of Tracy Jackson who was assistant to Chris Rooker, but Chris will even tell you, ran our commercial insurance business. And she redhead, so if you would be stereotypical, she could get pretty fiery, if you will. And I loved her. I hired her in May of 91. So this is somebody that I truly loved to death. Sadly, we lost her a couple of years ago to leukemia. But she came off she was always very generous, and there was a dynamic going with one of the local charities that said, hey, if you give to us, we're only going to give to these handful of causes that we care about. And she just was mad as a hornet, man. She came in, she pounded the table going, I don't want to give to those. I want to give to the charities I care about. And I had just stepped off the board of the Community Foundation of North Texas, or maybe I was on the last leg of that journey. And I just kind of had this epiphany. I was like, you know what? Tracy's not unusual. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to marry up a donor advised fund so our employees can give to that fund and let them give to whomever they want to give to. And so that we seeded it with Higginbotham funds, $50,000 in 2011. To date, we've between employee donations and pledges, we were up to 10 million. We've given back 8 million. And our goal is to give, we don't want, this isn't a foundation that we want to hire staff. We're happy to third party it. Now we've got a kind of a community relations partner inside our firm. But the way it works is if you give to the fund, then once a quarter, you can request a grant to go to the charity you're choosing. And every location, so we have 100 plus locations, every location has kind of a community leader. Now that person their day job might be a producer or an accountant or IT or whatever, but we've tried to do a good job from an advocacy perspective, find people that really do care about the community. And it's just incredible. And then we've been blessed as a business because we just run a good business. We've been able to make distributions literally since 2012. And we always take $1 or $2 out of that distribution and also put it in the Higginbotham Community Fund. Sadly, I've got some stingy partners that aren't as generous as all. And so that's the way I can get even with them, right? I'm teasing, but there are a few maybe. So that also kind of creates the sustainability of this fund because we've got a, 7-figure in terms of shares outstanding. So that kind of guarantees that to happen. We've got unbelievable participation by our employee group. And then once a year at our HLC, our Higginbotham Leadership Conference, I kind of shame the producers, which empirically in our industry, it's like lawyers. They're typically the largest wage earners in a law firm. In our case, it's typically the producers. And so I kind of strong arm them to give to the fund. And they do. Matter of fact, I think some of them don't intentionally give, on a payroll deduction basis because they kind of enjoy that bantering back and forth. But like last year, as an example, that group collectively, now you're talking 600 people, but they gave $1,005,000 to the Higginbotham Community Fund. So for me, is the maybe call it my vision, even though I want to certainly share it with Tracy because her act got me launched in. I didn't want her mad at me a week after that first meeting, right? But I think that has enabled us to be generous as a company. And again, back to the integration. When somebody joins us, immediately we want one of their colleagues to be part of the Higginbotham Community Fund because when they see that, they realize we're more than just driving profits. We're very profitable, but we're there to support them as a new partner and more importantly, support the market that they're in and do what they care about, not being dictated what comes out of Fort Worth.
Right.
So there you have it.
Rusty, I'm rooting for you in Higginbotham.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll take all we can get. I promise you.
Well, I don't know if you need it. This is an incredible story, and I appreciate you sharing it today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm again, as I told you on the front end, I don't think the mics were on. Very flattered. I did a research. Obviously, my boys and many of like TJ Hutchins, you got a lot of big fans of yours, and they all were like, "Oh, this is so cool. He's got you on this podcast." So I'm very excited. Very, very excited.
Well, thanks again for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.